Testing, 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 testing.
Good morning and welcome to the regular council meeting of the town of Qualicum Beach. I acknowledge that we are on the traditional territories of the Coast Salish people, in particular our friends at the Kwalikum First Nation. So with that, we need a motion to adopt the agenda. But I'd like to ask Council to agree at the end of the meeting to have a special in-camera under the provision that provided under Section 91E under the Community Charter, and it's about a land issue. Is Council okay with that? Yep. So by consent, we're going into another session after the meeting. Okay. Thank you. So then the agenda is, any other changes to the agenda? Then the agenda is adopted as amended. And we have the consent agenda, which is mostly the meetings, minutes of the meetings that we had. Are any errors or omissions in those minutes? Then those minutes are adopted by consent. Delegations. And the first one is, pardon?
I just had one question too about staff reports, which is usually part of the consent agenda, but after, yeah. There is also correspondence. I think maybe there might be one or two questions.
Do you have a concern about the correspondence log? Oh, Councillor Skipsey, go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to ask about correspondence 641, and it was a question about the skate park and whether any of the material or labor was from the USA. And I didn't know whether staff had information on that.
Mr. Sales.
Thank you. So in response to that question, a written response was previously provided. So the majority of the materials are provided locally, and there is specialized expertise that comes from the contractor, New Line Skate Parks, and they are based in Canada. They have assets in the United States as well. But in terms of the specific materials, that wasn't a part of the proposal at the time, and I can't answer that directly. But bulk materials are provided locally, and the concrete is provided from a supplier here in Oceanside.
And then Councillor Young, you had one, and then Councillor Harrison.
I'd like to also add on the correspondence log on January 21st, we received 2025 budget questions and comments, and that's referred to staff.
Ms. Swinson, did you get the details?
Is it a new letter you're referring to?
No, it was dated January 21st.
Correct, but you want it included on the
Yes,
next?
please.
Okay, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Young, Councillor Harrison.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. So my question is just about the year-end reporting for like bylaw building reports. I just want to make sure if we're doing this quarterly, we don't get a December through February report, that we do actually get like a 2024, this is a year-end, and then maybe if you wanted to do January and February as a separate, just so that way you're able to see year over year consistently what's happening in the town, as opposed to guessing which of the 3 months you apply and which month you move into which section. It'll just make it a lot clearer for where we're at with the sort of bylaws, everything else. Thanks.
Thank you. Any comments from staff? Okay with that? Thank you. So no other changes or questions? Then so can I go by consent that we all agree with what's there? Thank you. Delegations, former councillor and active golf. Are you still golfing, Jack? No. Okay.
I might start up again.
Okay, I'll call you up on one of these days. So Councillor Wilson, Mr. Wilson, you have up to 5 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Jack Wilson. I live at 1211 Pintail Drive, and I and my neighbors have a noise problem. It emanates from property across the street from me on the northeast corner of Pintail and Yambury. They have a gardener who comes every Tuesday and starts about 10:30 in the morning until about 6:30 at night. And he runs gas-powered machinery for about 6 hours. A gas-powered hedge trimmer and a gas-powered leaf blower. It's louder than anything I've seen of those types. But it's the equivalent of having a chainsaw running across the street from you for 6 hours every Tuesday. You can't go outside comfortably when he's on Tuesdays. You certainly can't sit outside and have a cup of coffee on a summer day. I can hear it with the inside my house with all the windows and doors closed. That's how loud it is. We've spoken to the property owners and have my neighbors. They don't care. They simply don't care. And that's why I'm here to have council replace their civic duty to be tolerant of their neighbors. We've contacted Mr. Marshall, I guess about a year and a half ago, and he came very promptly and had his audio meter, I guess is that's what it's called, and flashed it across the road, but it was just under the allowable limit. There's about a 25-meter road allowance between our two property lines, so that exponentially goes down with distance. So what I'm suggesting is council needs to be creative here. There's nothing to prevent the property owners from doing what they're doing, and that needs to stop, in my opinion. So I'm suggesting contact your lawyers. This is a nuisance. Contact the municipal association. Maybe there's other municipalities that have had this kind of problem and how they addressed it. But it needs to be done. I'm a retired lawyer, and under ancient English common law, a property owner is entitled to quiet enjoyment of their property. So I'm asking this council to please make that happen. Thank you. And now I'd like to have my former neighbor, Maeve Lowen, address the council.
My name is Maeve Lowen, and I used to live on the corner of Pintail and Yambury, kitty corner to this neighbor that basically what we call it stay in the house Tuesday, because you cannot sit out in your yard, front or back, and carry on any kind of a conversation. We have spoken to the neighbor, we have spoken to the young gentleman that does the work, and basically nothing. So I think it's become an issue where we need to look at our noise bylaw, because this is ridiculous to have somebody operating at high level, high pitch for over 6 hours every Tuesday. And we recently moved, and I just want to say that one of the factors in our move was exactly stay in the house Tuesdays. Thank you.
Thank you both for your presentation. Any questions from council? Thank you. And as Jack or Mr. Wilson knows, we usually don't respond right away. We'll ask staff to provide us with input as what we can do about your question. Thank you. You'd have to come back.
I'd ask council to have a hefty fine involved for infractions of the new bylaw that I hope is coming, and not to make it commencing in 2026 or something like this. This should be addressed by spring, I would hope. Thank you very much.
Okay, would you turn the microphone? Thank you. Councillor Harrison.
I just want to add to, I've been hearing complaints about that exact property and that one issue for a while. And I do understand it is a real thing. It is kind of unique in Eagle Crest. I haven't heard that from any other property owner. It's just that one property, one contractor. It's, yeah, and it is problematic, so I do sympathize.
So with that, we'll go to the curling club. Who would like to speak first? And just state your name and if you live in Kwalikum Beach or not.
Good morning. Yes, John Evans. I live in Kwalikum Beach. Thank you, everyone, for the opportunity to present to you today. As the chair of the Qualicum Beach Curling Center, I'm proud to share that our club has been part of this community for over 60 years now. Our members greatly appreciate the good relationship that we have with the town of Qualicum Beach. We've recently celebrated our 60-year anniversary with a Battle of the Sexes competition amongst our members. I have to report that the ladies were victorious. The men did not really show up that day. Our building, while full of history, is, as you know, after 60 years, constantly in need of upgrades to ensure that it continues to serve our members as well as the community for years to come. I have the pleasure of introducing two key members of our team. I kind of think of myself as the lead singer of the band. These guys back here, they do all the work. With me, I have our finance director, Stu Shaw, as well as our facilities director, Daryl Snedden. And we'd just like to provide you with the, what we see as the necessary improvements to our building over the next 5 years, as well as the financial aspects of our plan. So thank you very much, and I'll introduce you to, or I'll have Stu take over now.
Thanks very much. If you could move ahead a couple slides, it'd be great. Oh, it's it here? Where do I, sorry about that, where do I go with this? Okay. As our lease with the town was established in January 1st, 2020. It was a 5-year lease with an automatic 5-year renewal. We are now into year 1 of our renewal term. We pay operating costs, capital costs are shared. This here is now our projection for the 5 years. So I want to highlight 2024. I'll go into details, but this here is the portion of the capital that the town has been paying and what we see as future projects in 2025 through 2029. You'll notice some that are 100% town and others that are shared below that. The club itself also has capital commitments, and we've got that planned out as well. What we've spent, we plan to spend the next 5 years, and then we have a total capital budget down below of what those numbers are. And I'm going to get into the years fairly quickly here to move forward. 2024 is a big year for us. We had a technical safety BC's audit, and we come up with some shortfalls due to standards changing. The big thing was we had to isolate our refrigeration system. This required a major change to our structure, which was part of the building. You'll notice some pictures there that are really key to display what was undertaken this past summer. It was a lot of effort, and we had to isolate our refrigeration system, which required us to build a whole new addition to the structure, to our building, Curling Center, and we did that almost entirely with volunteer labor. So the total cost to the town was $43,000 if you take out the engineering and architecture, which wasn't kind of part of the budget. But the volunteer labor, which we had budgeted 12, we actually contributed about 25,000. And congratulations to Daryl and his team for that. We just had the technical safety BC sign off everything, and we're all compliant now. So that's a big win for both ourselves and the town on that one. 2025, we deferred this project, and we got a number of lounge upgrades. The one that's going to impact the town is the flooring. We've actually got, you'll see a picture, this is our picture of our lounge. Part of the flooring is breaking apart. It's a safety issue, and so we're going to need to repair that. What we're proposing is the town pay for the material, the work for that. We'll supply volunteer demo and subfloor work because it's also uneven. That's part of the safety issue. And then we'll have a contractor come in and put in a new floor. We're looking at this point, vinyl laminate flooring, and we've priced it out to $20,000 would likely do that for us. We've got, while we're doing, the lounge is going through repairs, the curling club itself is going through, we've put aside some money to do things like sound barrier upgrades, replace our TVs, viewing cameras, which are old and starting to fail on us, upgrade our ice machine, which we've had a number of issues with, and do some lighting and painting. Again, a lot of that will be volunteer work, but we've got a $21,000 commitment on our side. That's planned for 2025, which would impact your budget accordingly. 2026 is the big one. So we've had this on the hopper for at least 5 years, and that's our roof. Our roof is leaking. It's quite frequent now. Anytime we get a major rain, it's leaking. So we've had this in our plan for the last number of years. We've actually done an initial estimate, and that's to replace the roof with new metal roof, hidden gutters, and insulate to R30. And it's a big number. And we've also got an old chiller on the roof. Well, our commitment would be we would get a crane in and trailer and dispose of that. But obviously the roof itself would be a town commitment. We also looked briefly at solar as a sustainability option. It might be an option. It's not the best fit for ourselves because we need all our power in the winter, and solar's being produced in the summer. There's also maintenance cost issues that would also be the town. So we work closely with the town on whatever needs to be done, but that is probably something that needs to be done because right now the town is running over, repairing the roof when they can.
Okay, Mr. Young, that your time is almost up, but I
Yep.
can see you probably need some more time. Is council okay if we extend the time? Go ahead.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that, Your Honor. So we've got in 2026 some commitments to do some dishwasher, other equipment updates planned for that year. 2027 to 29, we've purposely planned nothing for the town for 27 because of the size of the commitment in 26 with the roof. So we've got nothing planned for that year. We're planning to replace our ice scraper and a few things down there, our lounge chairs. And then we've got a couple projects planned out in 28, 29 that are will be evaluated as we go forward with our back deck and our disability lift in the lounge. So, you know, those are the things we've got planned over the 5 years. We really have had a very positive collaboration between us. We're very appreciative of the work that the town has been able to do with us, and we look forward to continuing the partnership as we move forward, and we very much appreciate your support and your time today. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions to the delegation? Councillor Harrison.
First, I just want to commend you on being the most chivalrous group of gentlemen curling, with letting the ladies win.
It wasn't a let the ladies, unfortunately, it wasn't a let the ladies win.
I'm trying to get you a line to console yourself with. But the real question is,
nice, Councillor Harrison.
yeah, but my real question, though, is actually about utilization. So obviously, building a new facility, it's way more expensive than just fixing the roof. What sort of utilization does a golf and curling club have of the space, would you estimate?
Yeah, so our membership has grown dramatically. Pre-COVID, we were approximately 280 members. Obviously, through COVID, there was a decline, but since COVID, we're up to now 410 members, which has been great. It services memberships. In our first slide we had there between the ages of 9 and 92, and it's inclusive. We have, so that's our curling season. In the non-curling season, we have a couple of events that we hold there. The Roto Society, we host them or utilize the facility for that. But the big one is pickleball, is now being utilized there. The Qualicum Beach Pickleball Society uses it. We also, for us, a key fundraising activity is we have a couple of major bottle drives. We use the cement area to gather, and that's a big part of how we're funding some of our capital contributions.
Well, thank you. And our council's very much appreciative how this whole story of 60 years is a wonderful example, I think, of everything that's good about Qualicum Beach and its partnerships with volunteers. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mayor.
So the next item is correspondence from any comments from staff about this? Or did anybody from council ask for this letter to be on the agenda? Not sure what the reason was why it's on the agenda. Pardon? Go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you. I didn't pull this letter or ask it, but I did have a very similar conversation about a month ago with a gentleman involved with the same group, looking at ways we might be able to have the RDN. I think the RDN is having a series of discussions on potential uses for the whole corridor through the RDN area. And he's looking at ways to apply for federal funding for active transportation and maybe a collaboration with the Kwalikum Nation on some things. But I know there's a process at the RDN that has to be done, so it's not something we can just immediately do.
Thank you. And I take this as an opportunity to also say that we've had meetings with Chief Rakama and the CEO of Allen Corridor Foundation and one of their staff. And it's quite encouraging to work with our chief on anything, but he's also very interested in the future of the train station. So those discussions will continue. We're actually going on a road tour to see what the train station in Ladysmith and Nanaimo and maybe some other places in Duncan, what they've done with their train station. And so be involved with the Alan Corda Foundation to make this more of a cultural hub. So that's all I can say at this point. Thank you. Councillor Harrison.
And I just want to add too, I think his name is Mr. Bevan, is the new head, Thomas Bevan. He's a young guy, he has a lot of ideas, and he's very flexible. Whereas in the past I found ICF to be very rigid about the use of the corridor and their aims. He really seems like he's listening to folks from a variety of backgrounds, so it's really encouraging to see. So just hat tip to Mr. Bevan.
Yes, and I acknowledge Mr. Sales joined us when we had lunch here at Bailey's, and it was like sparks flying about two planners, because he's actually from a planning background, and so they have the same language, it seems. So that was very good. Committee reports. I just want to say that the board adopted the borrowing of $540,000 from the Municipal Finance Authority of British Columbia over a 30-year term for the purpose of funding the town Kwalikum Beach East Village beautification and servicing along 2nd Avenue. So that was adopted. I also had a meeting that was organized by MP Gordjans about the effect of tariffs, Trump tariffs. And so there's a serious concern about how that might affect local economies. And so we'll be meeting again to see what comes up out of the meetings that the Premier is having and others in Washington. But there's a serious concern about this. At this point, I think it would be premature to say much more than encourage people to buy Canadian. We've always had a kind of a social procurement, strategic procurement policy that we try to buy local, certainly if not local on the island or British Columbia or Canadian. So that was one of the things that seemed like the 26 participants, mayors, chairs, and chiefs could agree on, that we should do more for our own economy. Thank you. The next is Councillor Harrison.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. In terms of things not in the endless list of notices of motions, there's a meeting for the Task Force on Homelessness. They hadn't met for some time. One of the issues they're having when you have multiple small emergency weather responses is that you're usually hiring people with very little notice. So today it's actually meeting the temperature threshold. I need someone to work from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. Well, that's a difficult shift to fill on 24 hours notice or less sometimes. So if we're going to have multiple locations as just the emergency response, staffing will start to become more of an issue. Just what Violet Hayes was saying from Island Crisis Care is that if you had consistent hours, even if it's just for a few months, that would be a lot easier to staff if you're going to have multiple locations. But I will note too, there are, I think as of the next couple of days, I think there are 2 evening locations, one in Arrington with the Oceanside Church and one in town with Christian Fellowship. But just that was the one piece of feedback about some of the things that have been going on recently, is just the staffing, of course. When it's short notice, I worked on call doing live-in care for folks with disabilities, and I remember being on call and getting those calls. We need you to work an evening shift in 4 hours, and it doesn't always work out. So that's just the one complication. Notice of motion, sorry, it's a little bit obnoxious, but I was going to do actually an amendment to that too, to actually address the point that was raised by Councillor Skipsey. I do think that this is something I know the City of Parksville, Sean Wood just passed something which is much more stringent than this, where it just says we won't let Americans apply for contracts. I'm not sure that's what we want to say for several reasons. But what I want to suggest too is it's not just looking at the beneficial ownership of the business, but also that we're trying to use Canadian suppliers and materials where possible. Understanding, of course, that not every business can source everything from just Canada without difficulty. I get that. But the intent would be, this is something that where we're trying to make it clear without making it a hard requirement that we're trying to use Canadian suppliers, trying to use Canadian materials as much as possible. I talked to the mayor before the meeting. He did say maybe we should just refer this to legal. The other thing I also mentioned is that we have a social procurement policy. When I tried to find it online on our website, I actually can't bring it up. So that was difficult to find. But this might be something too where we rolled into social procurement moving forward. So currently I think you have a 5% variance in your bid if you check off all the check boxes in our social procurement policy. And you could do something like if you're a Canadian-owned company, you get an extra 1%, and if you use local Canadian materials and suppliers, you get an extra 2%. So there's a few different ways to do that. Personally, I'd like to get it passed as quickly as possible, but I understand we want to be on the right side of the law on this, so I just suggest that first we have to move it, if I may, and then we can defer it.
Yes, and I think what you're doing is very appropriate, asking basically staff, saying, here are the things we need to check before we shoot from the hip, so to speak. So I will accept it, and then I will ask for a motion to defer it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, I totally agree.
Go ahead.
And so just move the motion, and I'll let staff know about the amendment too, so, because it's going to be referred to legal anyways.
Yeah.
So no point getting too wrapped up in the amendment right now.
So it's been seconded, and motion to defer?
Sure,
Councillor
motion to
Harrison,
defer.
Councillor Skipsey, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you.
Okay, and the rest are pretty straightforward. I don't mind them being deferred a bit, but I do think these are general things in terms of housing. You know, at the last meeting, I think it was a little bit confusing with how many units are we actually building. So with the data we have for how many units we're building from January, I think was November was the cutoff for the last building report. We're building, I think it was about 11 single-family homes, about 3 or 4 units of multifamily, and then about 12 or 15 additions and secondary suites. But what the province is looking at in terms of what they call the naughty list, so why West Vancouver and Oak Bay now have a provincial advisor in their council guiding them on how to do housing approvals, is the number of units that are built. For the OCP process, we're looking at just meeting our housing needs report, right? That's fine. But if we want to avoid the province sending in someone to tell us how to change our processes to get the number of units built, it will actually be the number of units built. The intent here is just to sort of look at the gentle density in the village neighborhood. We've always talked about how do we get more of those units built, because we're not seeing a lot of those units right now. So I'm happy to just accept this staff recommendation on 2 through 4, because I understand, sure, defer it for the staff comment. So 2, 3, 4, all of them. But that's just basically where it's coming from, is making sure that we're building those triplexes, those row homes, the patio homes, the different types of housing stock than just single family and apartment. How do we get that built? And talk to the folks who build homes for a living to get their feedback on, this is how you actually make it economically viable for us to do it, so we can do more of that. And that's the intent.
Thank you, and I'll second the motion to defer to March 12th. And thank you for articulating that so well. Appreciate it. Thank you. Did that conclude your report?
Yeah, that, obviously, I'm deeply concerned about the Trump tariffs, but some of the things I'd be probably talking about to other elected representatives. And as we sort of deferred the first one, I would caution some of my municipal colleagues. I understand the passion to be as strong in your response as possible to what's happening with our neighbors, but be aware there are existing federal laws, and you really don't want someone to pick on you as the example. So just do be cautious. As we get like regional districts, I'm sure we'll be talking about a response. I'm sure at AVICC, there'll probably be an emergency resolution. We just want to make sure that we're staying on the right side of what's USMCA and applicable, international law, because it's a very complicated field and I don't know everything about it.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Councillor Skipsey.
Thank you. I just wanted to make a comment about the first notice of motion. I remember when the trade agreement was signed with China.
Sorry, which notice of motion?
Councillor Harrison's.
Oh, we passed that. That's passed. You need to go into your own report now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, I think there's things that we should be considering, but anyways, okay. I didn't really have a chance to speak to that. I submitted my report, and I think it's pretty straightforward. I just wanted to mention that I will be walking in the coldest night of the year event this year. I know Councillor Young is as well, and that's February 22nd. And if people are wanting to get involved and they're looking for more people to walk, or if you can't walk, then you can always donate. And it's a very worthwhile event, and all of the money stays local, all of the money that's raised for homeless and people in need. So I'll just end with that.
Thank you. Councillor Vander.
Yes, thank you. Again, I have my written report, which is relatively brief, but I did want to make a comment on the last event that I attended within this time frame, which was the board meeting for the Parksville Kwalikum Beach Tourism Association. And at that meeting, the Parksville Downtown Business Association mentioned that through their initiative, Imagine Parksville Downtown has hired Will Bacher, used to be with the company called Destination Think, and they did the report for the PQBTA destination strategy. And in that destination strategy, they used a tool, a research methodology called Place DNA, which I have mentioned previously at meetings. But I just thought it was worth talking about what Place DNA is. And essentially, it's used to answer the question, what makes Kwalikum Beach Kwalikum Beach? And identifies the attributes that shape the look, feel, and culture of the area. And I wanted to mention a couple of their findings and suggestions. One, no surprise to us, but Kwalikum Beach, Parksville Kwalikum Beach is home to predominantly a senior population. But it is interesting that according to Statistics Canada projections, this will continue to grow. Second, just as many places on Vancouver Island, nature is the foundation, whereas other places are more urban, remote, rugged, or raw. The essence of Parksville Kwalikum Beach is calmer, warmer, gentler, as well as timeless and mature. It offers, and I quote, authentic culture in a peaceful way. The third point that I thought was interesting was the region provokes a great sense of nostalgia through both its look and feel, the experiences it offers, and the memories visitors cherish from past visits. A tangible manifestation of this nostalgia is the look and feel of downtown Kwalikum Beach, which I would extend to that of the whole town of Kwalikum Beach. Another point is Parksville Kwalikum Beach are also a part of Mount Arrowsmith Biosphere Region, a UNESCO Biosphere Reserve, confirming the importance and uniqueness of the environment. And a fifth point is that there is a strong need for workforce housing in the area. The PQBTA Destination Strategy Report emphasizes the character and vibe of the town are appreciated not only by town residents, but by visitors too. And I think that the information that's in this report would be useful when we are looking at our OCP review. I believe that we will be in discussions with the stakeholders, and the PQBTA will be one of those stakeholders. But I think that the report does have some very valuable information for the town. And if people want to delve further into the information, they can find it on the PQBTA website. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Councillor Van der Valk. Councillor Young.
I also submitted a report on Friday, but since then, I've attended some other meetings this week. I want to thank the Kwalikum Beach Resident Association for hosting yesterday a public session with Luke Sales, our planner, and introducing Bailey, a new staff member, regarding the OCP survey that's currently circulating. And the comment was that it was focused predominantly on housing. But I want to mention that, and Ann Skipsey was also there, and she also heads the Environmental and Sustainability Committee. And so when people say that this survey was only on housing, I feel council is always open to your comments and concerns when it regards climate change, tree bylaw, and anything else to do with environment and any other subjects. So I hope that we are there for you in all aspects. Also, I want to thank the many volunteer service boards that we have. For instance, I also attended Rotary this week, and we have many programs that support our youth. They have leadership programs, they have exchange student programs to a foreign country for a year, they have scholarships, a wonderful service club that we have. Another organization that I had a meeting with was ELCO, which is Early Learning Child Care Council, and they have now hired a staff member to look into all the daycares in Oceanside to hopefully get more on board on the $10 a day daycare, which is really needed for our workforce. Also had a conversation with Tosh, and please check their websites for all their new exhibits and classes that they're constantly hosting. Also had a meeting with the Qualicum Beach Garden Club. The speaker this month was on tower gardening, and with our crazy economic times and food security, the Garden Club has been able to continuously, and with past programs as well, showcase how a person locally can have a garden that's bountiful all year round. So we've had speakers on tower gardening, on greenhouses, on water smart, all that kind of stuff. So I just want to put it out there that we have wonderful organizations for all our residents to be involved in. And also want to mention Family Day Committee also had a meeting, and they're having, hot meetings on the planning of the Family Day that's coming up for Qualicum Beach the last Sunday of May. So stay tuned for that, and look on their website soon for sign-up sheets. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Young. We have a staff report, and we'll start with Ms. Swenson.
Thank you, Mayor Westbrook. So on page 20 of your package, there's a staff report on a summary of council resolutions from when council was elected in November of 2022. The full summary of the council index for 2024 was included in your package. And on page 57 of your package, there's a staff recommendation to rescind resolutions that for various reasons, the comments are listed beside each resolution. We can take them one at a time, or take them as a batch if council wishes.
Councillor Harrison.
Might I suggest that there's just a couple of questions I had about earlier resolutions. So maybe we should go through all the resolutions first and then look at the rescinding second, if that'd be acceptable?
We could. What I thought we could do is move the recommendation, but then pull out the ones you want to discuss individually. Would that work? Councillor Young?
Can I ask for a review page by page in order, so we're not jumping all over this?
Are you sure you want to do that?
Yes, please.
Does council want to do that? Or just say the batch, because that's a lot of, yeah, one at a time? Okay. All right. Well, since you read it up, I'll let you go first. Which one would you like to discuss?
Okay, on page 26, I highlighted.
What about page 24? Nothing on page 24?
I didn't have anything. Did anybody else?
Okay. Ms. Swenson?
Yes, sorry, if you could just quote the resolution number on the far left column, so R24 dash, and then whatever number it is, we can, do you see it on the left-hand side?
Okay, yep. So on R24027, it's still highlighted in yellow. I thought it would be completed.
Ms. Swenson?
That item is still pending, sorry, that item is still pending with council and will be subject of an in-camera meeting.
Okay. All righty. Okay, on R24059,
What page are you on?
that is page 30. It's in regards to a letter to be sent to the Central Island Division of Family Practice and Oceanside Primary Care Network and Flowerstone Health Society to request how to spend $544,500 from the community amenity contribution. What progress do we have on that?
Ms. Swenson?
Thank you. The letter will not be sent until the funds are received, so that's why it's still yellow pending.
Okay. Thanks. Okay, R24063, in regards to the town of Kwalikum Beach has awarded website redesign to Kimbo Design in the amount of $43,800. It says it's complete. Can we have a review at the samples and go forward with using the samples?
Ms. Swenson?
Thank you. The contract is well underway and will be, the full website launch will be presented to council in the end of February.
Thank you.
Okay. And then on R24064, same page, in regards to permission for special events, I had questioned if the Twilight Concert Series at the St. Andrew's Lodge and the Arts and Music Festival at the same place, will they be carried on for 2025?
Ms. Swenson?
The resolutions that are listed here were for 2024, and it's up to the individual applicants whether they are submitting applications for those events. I do believe the concert series has already been submitted and approved for 2025.
Yeah.
But these resolutions are strictly for 2024.
I just wanted to highlight, because I didn't recall that it was already done for this year, and I just wanted to have it as a reminder because this is dated for February the 7th. So just, yeah. Just want to make sure that we're on board for this year. Sorry. Anybody else has anything?
That's it. Well, we can go and give you a break, and then maybe
Yeah,
some
please.
other member of council can start. Councillor Skipsey.
Thank you. I'm going to go back to R24012, which is with regard to the basketball courts at KSS. And just last night, I was at a PAC meeting, a KSS PAC meeting, where Phil Monroe was in attendance. He's in charge of all of the maintenance and infrastructure for the school district, and he made a presentation on the basketball courts, where they would be, what they might look like. And my understanding is they're looking at this as a multi-use asset that could also be used for various other sports like lacrosse, soccer, and also pickleball. So I think it is worth further discussion and consideration. I would hate to scratch this from rescind this motion at this time.
So, Ms. Svensson, it is completed. according to the list. So what is your recommendation if we want to reconsider this?
Sorry, Mayor Westbrook, but R12 is actually slated to be rescinded. The staff recommendation was to rescind it, but it's up to council. So if council wants to leave it on the books as a resolution, we can leave it there. But our recommendation was to rescind because we had no further action. Mr. Sales?
Mr. Sales?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Westbrook. So I did meet with Mr. Munro, and this was at the early stages of conceptual design for that basketball court concept. So our discussion was that when the school district was ready to reach out with a specific proposal and possibly a funding request, they would make that request directly to the town. So until that information is available, there's nothing to report other than the fact that a conversation happened. So it could be left on the books, but essentially the ball, no pun intended, is in the hands of the school district at the moment.
Ms. Varela.
Thank you, Your Worship. And it is noting that it is a letter dated January 8, 2023, so perhaps there could be more relevant or current information brought forward subsequent to this motion being rescinded, but that letter may be out of date, up to council. I don't have it before me.
Thank you. What is your wish, Councillor Skipsey?
My preference would be to leave it until we have a chance to review the letter and then make a decision based on that.
Sure. So your motion would be not to rescind it?
That's correct. So when we get to that page, maybe we can just strike it and then not include it in the motion
Okay.
for now. And then there's another one too that R24046 is with regard to the Sue Big Oil. And I have been working on this. I wasn't aware that this was coming forward and that we would be making decisions at this point. So I would like to ask council's indulgence to defer this one for one more month so I can find out more. I've been in touch with a councillor from the city of Burnaby where they voted 8 out of 9 in favor of participating. And my understanding is that what may have been a barrier around following through with obtaining the legal opinion may no longer be a barrier. So, and then since we consider this, both the city of Burnaby and Port Moody have joined up. So I would like to have the opportunity to follow up on that. So even if that could be deferred for another month, I would ask council to consider that.
Okay. Perhaps we can take that one right now, that you could defer this one. Ms. Svensson, do you have the number? Go ahead.
So we would just leave those and change the colors to yellow. There'd be no motion required. This was staff's recommendation to rescind. So R46 and R47 would be changed to yellow, and we'll just leave them waiting for a response from Councillor Skipsey.
That would be
That
good.
works for you?
Yes,
okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
And then there was R24122, and that was with regard to a motion to the province about the BC Residential Tenancy Act.
Yeah.
And I have reached out to the Landlord BC organization, but I haven't had a reply. I did that at the beginning of January. So again, I would like to ask for an opportunity. This one, it says that it was completed, but that motion was actually deferred at that meeting in order to be able to better define the current failures of, I think that was Councillor Harrison had recommended that we do that. So again, I would just ask for a bit more time to follow through on that.
Okay. Could you tell me the number again?
Yeah, R24122.
Thank you.
And I think that is it for me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Harrison.
Thank you. I would just point out too, for Alting School District, we had a very instructive experience with the track where getting grants is very difficult because it's school district property. But they are able to ask local governments for support. But there's not a lot we can do in terms of getting them grants, unfortunately. And because they're a school district, apparently they're not subject to most grants. One thing, okay, I have it by page number, so I'm gonna have to do some flipping, sorry, staff. R24111 rather, and that was where we did the Festival of Lights, and then we sent out a letter saying, hey, have you considered using drones? Did we get any feedback from the proponents on that?
Ms. Swenson.
Through the chair. We sent a letter immediately when this was approved in 2024 and just requested that should they wish to do an event in 2025, that we would like to have consultation with them of an alternate means of fireworks. And we haven't heard anything for this year, so I don't know if they're doing anything, but we definitely will have the discussion if an application comes through.
And I just point out too, the two problems with drones is one, they're vastly more expensive than fireworks, and two, if there's adverse weather, the show is canceled. So that's just the two problems with drones. There's one community in BC where they had something set up and then it was a stormy night, and so the drones can't fly essentially when it's too windy out. Okay, that was one. There's a couple others which are yellow, which I was wondering if they were complete, but I think from the answers I've heard so far, staff usually have a good reason that they're yellow, so I don't think I'll follow up on all of those. And then last one, just 49. Sorry, I have it circled. Okay. Yes, R24-291. That was the accessibility grant, the Spark grant application for the flashing crosswalk at Harlequin Memorial. And I thought we'd already approved that as a council. I could be wrong.
Ms. Swenson.
Through the chair to Councillor Harrison. We're working with the Director of Infrastructure Services and our Capital Projects Manager, Oliver Watson, with Communications to submit the grant for that.
Okay. All right, thank you. Councillor Vander, any?
They've all been hit so far, so thanks.
Good, thank you. Councillor Skipsey.
Thank you. I did have a question about R23-082. That's on page 57, and it's about the concept of right tree, right place. And it had, I think this motion had come from the Environment and Sustainability Committee after all of their work on the Urban Forest Master Plan. And the recommendation was that when it be reviewed during the next official community plan review, when we're looking at development permits, and we know that we're not going to go down that road. But I'm just wondering if staff would have any other suggestions as to maybe a more appropriate place to direct this. I just would hate for all of the work and effort and commitment from the Environment and Sustainability Committee to just be rescinded.
Thank you. Ms. Varela.
Thank you, Your Worship. So we could add that to the 2026 Strategic Planning Initiative list for Council's future consideration. I am keeping track of all of those, both formally and informally, so a resolution isn't required, but I will add that to the list.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Skipsey.
Well, I just wondered maybe then if it could be referred to that process, if that would be appropriate or not.
Yes, I think just to deal with that, Councillor Harrison.
Yeah, the other option is the tree bylaw update. So if we're spending $50,000 on a consultant, that might be something that could fit within the scope of that work, because that's a fair chunk of money.
Councillor Skipsey, what is your wish with your motion?
I'm fine with that. If there's recommendations, I mean, it may not fit within the purview of the bylaw itself, but if the consultant had recommendations on how maybe other places where this would land, then that would be okay. But maybe try it at the tree bylaw, and if that doesn't work, then we'll go on to the strategic planning.
Sure, thank you. Anything else?
I was going to say, if this is something, we might still want to rescind it anyways, but just have that note that, or would it be a separate thing that we have it referred to strategic planning and then check the tree bylaw thing at the same time?
Ms. Swenson.
Through the chair, I would recommend rescinding this motion to take it off the 2023 books, and then we could make a new motion that it be referred to the tree bylaw and or referred to the blue sky list for strategic planning in 2026.
Yeah, that's a nice, clean approach, so I'll do it that way. Thank you. Do you want to make a motion now? Go ahead.
Okay, well, I would move that R23-082 be rescinded.
Thank you. And a seconder? Councillor Harrison, discussion? In favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Thank you. Please proceed.
And then that the motion as presented be referred, or no, I guess it would be a different motion because it talks about development permit, that the concept right tree, right place as referred from the Environment and Sustainability Committee be referred to, sorry, this is the tree bylaw review and/or strategic planning 2025.
Okay, that sounds pretty concise. I think that was well done on the fly, so thank you. And that's seconded by Councillor Harrison. Discussion. Okay, any discussion? All in favor? Opposed, if any, carried. I'll go back to Councillor Young. Any other?
So on page 29, in blue, R24049, the motion to write a letter to Vander Island Health Authority, the Ministry of Health, and the Premier regarding land that the town had given to VIHA. I'd like, it's in blue, so it means resend. I would like that letter still to be sent, asking for the land back to possibly consider an expansion of a long-term care facility there.
So what is your motion? What is your motion?
A motion is to send that letter and ask for consideration to have an expansion of a long-term care facility down at Eagle Park.
Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Skipsey. Seconding, discussion. Councillor Harrison.
So we have sent a letter to VIHA already. This is specifically about something where I was thinking about BC Builds. I don't think that's something I'd recommend. BC Builds is you have to build multifamily units for, essentially it's worker housing, but you have to get everything done within about 8 months. I don't think this council is comfortable with advancing a multifamily project in that location in 8 months. So I think it'd be wasting BC Build's time, frankly speaking. So that's why I don't think that letter is appropriate. In the last letter we sent VIHA, we did mention that that property is there. If you wanted to say a specific use, we might want to have the conversations with our healthcare providers first about what they think we need in our area before we tell VIHA what we think they need, because we might not have enough data to know that. There is Eagle Park already, it's already there, so it's basically the same use. It'd be an expansion of Eagle Park in essence. But I still think we're better served. I know we're supposed to be having a conversation with VIHA and other healthcare service providers in the near future. We might want to have that conversation first before we start sending off letters that are very specific with a vision for the property.
Thank you. Ms. Svensson?
Yes, just for clarity, this wouldn't require a motion. This was staff recommending we rescind it based on the fact that we didn't have the letter to send based on the BC build, so we wouldn't need a new resolution.
Yes. So are you prepared to make a new resolution?
Yes, that we do send a letter to VIHA to request that possibly we can consider expansion of Eagle Park long-term care facility.
Thank you. Seconding? Councillor Skipsey, seconding. Discussion. Councillor Harrison.
So that will go nowhere because VIHA has just invested hundreds of millions of dollars, I believe, in expanding long-term care in Landsville and the surrounding area. They are building, I think it's a 340-unit facility in Landsville, and it's supposed to service the whole area. So I don't think it's going to go anywhere because for them, they've probably just checked off that checkbox. Again, that's why I think it's much better before we start saying which service we want to do. We sit down and talk to VIHA about what are your top 3 priorities for our area. For investment, and then maybe we look at that list of the top 3 things they're thinking of and say, we prefer this one, or this is what we hear that folks are worried about. I think if you specify long-term care, they're going to say, thank you very much for your letter. Please refer to this press release last year. It was about 1.5 years ago they announced it, I think. It was just before the provincial, no. It's about 1.5 years or 2 years ago. It's not too long ago. It's pretty recent.
I remember that.
But it's a very significant expansion in long-term care. There's also some expansion in Campbell River too, but we're more focused in the RDN area about the Landsville facility.
Thank you. Councillor Vandervoort?
Yeah, I believe that we did also send a letter to Josie Osborne, the new Minister of Health, and mentioned that piece of property and that we would like to see it used locally for local services. So I think it may well behoove us to look more at what we need specifically and talk to the healthcare providers. I agree with Councillor Harrison. and also because Lanceville is getting a new long-term care facility. So my concern with this whole proposal was that we specified that it be used for our local residents and patients. So that would need to be emphasized, but.
Yeah, we did send a letter when the minister got her mandate and just drew her attention, as we have in the past with other ministries of health, that that property was provided for healthcare services, but not specifically for adding to the Eagle Park facility, but other services that was available. Land was always, seems to be the thing that held things up. They knew that land was available. They chose Lanceville. And so for us to come back to that, I think may be futile. But I think the letter to the minister stands, where we're asking to use that land for healthcare services in general. Like, we weren't specific, and I prefer that wording better. Okay? So with that, the motion on the floor, any further discussion? Councillor Harrison.
I just think that this motion might be good after the meeting with VIHA. I just prefer that we don't set it before the meeting with VIHA, that's all.
Okay. All right, on the motion, all in favor? Opposed? Motion fails. Thank you. Anything else, Ms. Young? Councillor Young?
On page 35, resolution number 122. Okay, we had sent a letter to the province about short-term rentals not renting out as long-term rentals. Can we reiterate that again to the province? I think it's maybe sometimes important to be pushing on a consistent basis or giving people an update as to what's going on. And if we could reinforce it again this year with another letter to the province. And that's why, like on the previous motion, I wanted to constantly revisit some things that we have been refused on to see if we can get some progress, and also to give them a more current update of the situation.
Councillor Skipsey.
This is the motion that I said was actually deferred previously, and we're going to change this to yellow so that it's just in progress, because that letter actually hasn't been sent.
Okay. All right.
Then on page 43, it's in red, and it's recommended to withdraw. I'd like for that to be activated. And that's Resolution 227, page 43.
Ms. Winston, what's the status of that?
So on page 61 of your package, Schedule D, that's the resolution that staff are recommending either withdrawing the motion on the floor or council voting on the matter. Hasn't been voted on. So when we get to that section, council can make a decision on what they would like to do with that.
Okay. Thank you.
Good. Okay, on page 51, Resolution 310, sorry. That has been completed, but my question was, what was the cost?
We don't have that yet, I don't think.
Okay.
This is about the pollinator path?
Yes.
Yeah. Councillor Harrison.
If I remember staff's report on that, is that they had significantly operationalized that, and as such, it was no longer a standalone item. It was something that was just being done on an operational level by staff. So I'm not sure if they'd be able to get a report out on costs, but that might be a separate thing if a member of council wanted that, I'm sure staff could do that. So if like you send staff an email, I just want to update on what we're spending on the pollinator pathways, then maybe the next council meeting, we might want to talk about that.
Ms. Vincent.
Thank you. So this initiative was not forwarded as a budget line item, so the scoping sheet was closed. However, the implementation was sent to the Parks Department, Operations Department, to see what they could do, just to include it in their daily parks planning, but it was not a separate line item that would have a budget item.
Okay. So, Councillor Young, do you want to make a motion to that effect or anything else, or just wait to see what the budget looks like?
Well, the reason why I'm asking about the cost is because if it's a minimal cost, then can we have pollinator pathways?
Ms. Varela.
So, Your Worship, if it's an increase in service level, Council has now adopted a policy that would go to strategic planning. So what we can do is report out again on what we're doing within 2025 for pollinator pathways. Last year, there was a standalone project that occurred, and so that might be part of the confusion here, but going forward, it has been operationalized, and staff can report out on where those locations are, and how that occurs in work planning later in the year. Again, I had flagged for council, we're changing coding and things like that, looking at how we're doing our work planning, tracking our time. So hopefully we have more of those kinds of metrics going forward, and I will flag that one for staff.
Everybody okay with that? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, on the same page, Resolution 314. There is a allocating $10,000 in 2027 to launch a public education campaign on to encourage residents and businesses to be fossil-free power equipment. Do we need to spend $10,000 in 2027? Can we not put that in our newsletters, have articles in the PQB News, just to keep residents in our community informed about this extra $10,000 expenditure?
Thank you. Ms. Varela.
Thank you, Your Worship. So that was a scoping sheet council considered recently at strategic planning. I think it is slotted in for 2027. And so again, council will have the opportunity to revisit that again this fall to see if you want to adjust the timeline. Thank you.
Yep. And the reason why this, the reason why the motion is here is to rescind it. Not this one?
This one's showing closed, Your Worship.
Okay, it is closed.
The action's completed
Complete.
when it was
Sure.
allocated in the budget book.
Great, thank you.
Okay, and then right underneath that, Resolution 315. Again, it's a budget provision of $25,000 for a paid consultant, I believe. What about using volunteers or retired experts that we have in our community, and also from and my fellow councillor, Ann Skipsey, her committee on environment and sustainability. Can we not utilize their knowledge and expertise instead of $25,000 to a consultant?
Ms. Varela.
Thank you, Your Worship. So a similar comment, council considered this during strategic planning, and you will have the opportunity to review that again this fall.
Okay. Councillor Skipsey.
Yeah, and I do think, I'll just add that we took out the wording that it would be used for a consultant so that there would be more leeway in how that $25,000 would be spent.
That's a good reminder, thank you. Councillor Harrison.
Just also too, anything where the recommendation is in strategic planning 2026, that'll be a new council. So we might want to remember that that'll be a new council budget. 2027 will also be the new council's budget. So that might be something where, you know, we just sort of wait to see what happens, because who knows what'll happen. I found, with my very modest experience, one time, some priorities change when you have a new council.
Yes, that's my experience too, thank you. So any further action required?
That's good, thank you. It's just I wanted clarification, and I ate many bags of chips reading this. Page 52, Resolution 322, regarding a needs assessment report to be done in 2027, 2027 for the Senior Activities Center expansion. I feel this senior center expansion is proactive for their health, and 2027 is another 2 years away. I'd like to follow up with the senior center if they can contribute to this feasibility study, or if they would just take on this project of getting a feasibility study and getting it done now.
Ms. Varela, I think we've discussed this at the strategic planning session.
Yes, we do. We did, Your Worship, and we do have a budget allocation of $30,000 for this project in fiscal 2027. So again, if direction, if additional direction were to be given by council, I would recommend it was this fall in the strategic planning process, as you have made your decisions for this year.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Skipsey?
I have one that's just around there. It's R24331. And it's that staff be authorized to work with the Oceanside Football Club to permit the installation of a shipping container. And it shows that it's fully complete. And I just wondered if it should maybe be yellow, because I think that's a work in progress.
Ms. Svensson?
Thank you. Through the chair to Councillor Skipsey. Yes, I did agree with your comment that you had thankfully forwarded ahead of time. We do have a suggested location, but we would need to bring that back to council for consideration. So there will be a report coming back, so we'll change it to yellow as pending.
Good, thank you. Anything else? Councillor Harrison?
So two things which aren't in here. One is something from the previous term. So the gentleman who does all the cleanup alongside the roads more in Parksville, Jason, I saw him in a grocery store the other day, made sure he's on the BC housing list as we have affordable housing coming up, and also mentioned we have a parks job coming up in the future potentially. So, you know, if you want to dust off your CV, it's something you could do if you want to. But in the previous term, we passed as a council a resolution that I brought forward about looking at collaborating with Island Crisis Care Society. So there are folks, there's a workplace program. I know we discussed this in this past, and staff's recommended that we put it on strategic planning for this year. It's just it's not showing up in the sort of resolutions that aren't complete or signed off yet, because it happened in the previous council term. So it's older than this list, but it has been something that basically got pushed back during COVID, understandably. I totally understand why you can't implement that in the middle of COVID. There were so many complications with staffing in COVID, you don't need any extra degree of difficulty. But it is something where talking to the folks at Island Crisis Care Society, they have a program which gets people ready, and it'd be seeing things like what sort of supplies they need to provide on their part, steel-toe boots, would that be a requirement, things like that, sort of training. So I just want to make sure that that doesn't get lost as we get into strategic planning, because it is an existing resolution of council which is already passed. So it doesn't need a new one, just to make sure that it's not slipping off.
So, Ms. Varela, how do we keep this on the books?
So that would be a 2022 resolution we're anticipating. So we'll go back and take a look at that and see what action is required by staff, if that gets added to a list or what it is. But we'll report back to council on that one, Your Worship.
Okay.
Yeah, we talked about this, I think, about 3 months ago, and it was mentioned that we might do it in the 2026 strategic planning, or this year's strategic planning, rather. So there should be an existing email about it in the email box. Second one is, I could be wrong. I might have missed it. There are a lot of resolutions, and maybe I just missed it because there's so many in a row. I thought we had something where we were looking at maybe doing a policy for the emergency cold weather shelters, just so there's transparency for the community. If someone wants to provide that service, these are the requirements. I'm not sure if that was ever done, or if that was a council resolution or not. So forgive me if that wasn't a resolution. I thought it was.
I don't remember it, but maybe Ms. Svensson or Ms. Varela does?
We'll look into that one as well and come back to Your Worship.
Okay.
So there'll be 2 follow-ups in relation to today's meeting on this particular item. Both of the resolutions coming forward from Councillor Harrison, so staff have grabbed both of those. Thank you.
Just for staff to make their job easier, it probably would have been in somewhere between February and April of last year. In that ballpark. So you don't have to go through 4 years, forgive me. It would have been done in about 8 months ago.
Okay. Well, I think we're getting there. Go ahead.
Just one more. Page 55, Resolution 360, regarding a plastic recycling bin. It's slated for strategic planning this year, but for discussion for 2026. I would like to see how we can move it up so that it could be maybe actioned on this year, because the importance of recycling is invaluable.
I'm just questioning whether it's reasonable, after going through the strategic plan and all the scoping sheets, and somebody doesn't like the answer, and then bring it back in a different format. I think we discussed it, we had scoping sheets, we were focused on it, and to bring it back now, when we already are burdening staff with lots of issues, and of course, this will cost money too. So we've been very careful about not increasing taxes or asking staff to do more. I've rarely been at this table where somebody asked to do less. It's always more. So I think we went through it, and I wouldn't support bringing it back at this table at this time. Thank you. Anything else? So, Ms. Swenson, there was a couple of motions that staff or council wanted to retain. Did you get all the numbers? Okay. So if I could have that, and we'll make that as a motion, and then we'll go into some of the other changes as well. Go ahead.
Okay, so if we, R23-082 we've dealt with. So if we could still rescind R23-136 and R23-343.
Okay.
Do you want to do them
separately?
Okay.
I'll take them one at a time.
Okay, so R23-136.
Moved by Councillor Harrison, second Councillor Skipsey. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed, if any, carried. And the next one?
R23-343.
Okay. I think that was Councillor Skipsey as well. Councillor Skipsey, seconded. Councillor Young. Discussion? Councillor Harrison.
Well, I think the problem here is also, too, that the ship has sailed. This is something where the initial rounds of funding, I think, have to be applied for to be eligible for subsequent rounds of funding. So last I heard from the last funding update, which was about 2 years ago, again, it was about 1.3 billion, so it's a lot of money. It's available for a whole bunch of things, ranging from infrastructure to actual housing projects. But because we didn't apply initially, I don't think we're eligible in any event. But I still would have liked to have seen a little bit of follow-up with staff where they actually reach out to the federal government to say, hey, is the money still available? I did that on my own, where I sort of know what's happening, but it would be nice to see that follow-up when there's so much money on the table.
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded.
Yes.
Further discussion? All in favor? Opposed, if any, carried. Thank you.
Okay, and then into the 2024, R24011, recommending to be rescinded.
Okay. Councillor Skipsey, Councillor Vandervalk, discussion? All in favor? Opposed, if any, carried. Thank you.
Okay, on R24012, we are changing that to defer, and same as the next one, R24046 is to defer, and so is R24047, so those will all change to yellow. So the next one recommended for rescinding is R24049.
Okay. Councillor Vandervalk, Councillor Harrison, discussion? All in favor? Opposed, if any, carried. Thank you.
And the next one, R24095.
Okay, we had a good presentation about that. So, Councillor Vandervalk, Councillor Skipsey, discussion, Councillor Harrison.
And I did follow up with the CAO for the RDN and the board chair. The problem with writing the letter is it basically starts getting to the point where you're almost calling out RDN staff for not doing their job well enough with their research sources, and that's a really awkward letter to send. So kind of thought the better of it when I thought it got home and sort of looked in the mirror and like, yeah, this is not a nice letter you want to send. This doesn't help anyone. So I did just have the conversation at UBCM last year with the board chair and the CAO, and for me, that's good enough.
Thank you. So any other actions required, Councillor?
Yes, on page 61, Schedule D, we're recommending that council withdraw the notice of motion on the floor or vote on the matter.
Okay. What is council?
I'm not sure if you just voted on the last, you didn't, sorry.
No, we said we'd vote on it at this time.
No, but just, sorry, on R24095, we just didn't vote. We've got a mover and seconder, but
Okay. Sorry, I stand to be corrected. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you, sorry. So page 61, R24-227.
Yes, we talked about that before, and now is the time to make a decision, to vote on it, or,
Correct.
Councillor, pardon?
Sorry, just one for resolutions and priors or whatever, the page 61, am I missing it? Sorry if I misheard.
That's the one I'm trying to get some instruction on from council, whether we withdraw the motion or council vote on the matter.
Because I thought we were talking about page 61 for a second, so I just want to make clear. We're talking about page 60 or page 61?
61.
This is page 61, R 24-22-7, and so we need to either rescind it or vote on it. So what is your wish? I'm not remember who brought this forward. I think it might have been Councillor Young.
I had hoped to activate it,
So you
keep
moved,
it in progress, or,
so you moved the recommendation or the motion on the floor?
It's already on the floor, so just need a seconder and then vote on it.
Okay, so you've moved it essentially. Seconding, Councillor Harrison. Discussion? Councillor Young?
so we are voting on this motion to withdraw this, and I'm not in favor of it.
All right.
Sorry, I think there might be some confusion.
Yes.
Defense.
There
This is the
is.
motion to actually to activate it.
Yeah, so the motion on the floor is that council lobby the BC Housing to provide financial support to nonprofit organizations who wish to provide their land for development of non-market housing, example Kiwanis and similar groups.
Yes.
So currently now, the motion is on the floor
And
to
you-
vote on.
Yeah, and we've moved and seconded it.
Yes.
Further discussion? Councillor Harrison.
Yeah, so I did want to debate this. I actually don't support the resolution as it's currently worded, but I think it's worth debating for 2 seconds. Reason being that BC Housing provides a ton of money already for non-market housing. The specific lens for this conversation goes back to properties like churches, where the church is looking for a little bit of income and revenue, usually because they have declining number of members and declining tithes. So they're hoping that the housing development provides them with some revenue. And BC Housing will probably just say, well, then split. Sorry, there was actually like a whole session at the conference I went to in November on this, where they actually looked at a proposal, and what they did is they actually sectioned the development into 3 separate sections: a commercial portion, market residential, and then a non-market residential. You need scale for that, but that's basically what they did, is BC Housing says, we'll take the non-market portion, the other stuff is on you, and you can make money as you see fit. That's probably how they'd respond to this. I know Councillor Young asked a question to BC Housing staff on this topic. I remember that question. I was in the room when you did that. I'm not sure if she got any particular feedback, but I think this would be something where if we want to advance this, it's not coming from council. It's maybe some faith-based organizations in the area saying, this is how much money we need to generate for us to do something. How can we work with you to get this? And that might be a better venue than the town sending a letter and then BC Housing sending, here's our existing programs and we're so happy to support non-market housing. Is sort of how I see this panning out. So I wouldn't support this motion, but I do think there's a good intent here and there's some work to do with this at the end of the day.
I did get some feedback from both sides, from a church, perhaps if there was some sort of leasing opportunity to getting some dollar value back for them allowing their land to be developed on. And my response from one of the government officials was that, yes, that could be taken into consideration down the road. So I think it still could be something we could pursue.
Thank you. Let's go mover and seconder and further discussion. Councillor Vander.
Yeah, I just think I agree with Councillor Harrison that I don't know that it's council's position to be lobbying BC Housing for this. I think it would be whatever organization is interested in providing their land rather than council. I don't think that's our job, really.
Councillor Young and then Councillor Harrison.
I disagree on that. I just feel that it is our job to try to find more non-market housing in our community, and which, however we can all collaborate on getting this done, is I would like to see that action happening.
Thank you. Councillor Harrison.
What I'd suggest with this is that we reach out to the faith-based groups in our area, and then they basically get a letter, and then they can ask for letters of support, right? As opposed to us taking point, we would sort of slipstream behind them, whether individually or collectively. I'd recommend collectively, honestly, because this is an issue in multiple communities, not just ours. But I do think that this is something where I would strongly recommend if there is an organization in town that, like, I don't want to say the name because I don't want to put them in a bind, but if they write a letter first saying, we want to do this, but this is what we need from BC Housing, and then they come to the town and say, and we want a letter of support for this because it's going to require us to rezone the property, whoever it is, and then we say, yep, you know, this is great, the church wants to do this, great, happy to support it, then that way too, we can also follow up. Like, I know people in BC Housing organization. There's a reason I take meetings when I show up at UBCM with BC Housing. There's to make the contacts. So I'm happy to put a lot of work behind that. But I just think that maybe the church takes point, not the town.
All right, so your basic suggestion that we should fail this motion, but that we would invite local faith groups or other organizations to write a letter asking for the change in zoning, and then we'll look at that. All right, so on the motion on the floor, further discussion, all in favor? Opposed? Opposed? Okay, motion fails. Thank you.
Should we have a second motion as a substitute?
Go ahead.
Sorry, Your Worship, I don't want to take it away from Councillor Young because this is really her baby, but maybe just a motion to the effect of if there's a faith-based group saying we'd be willing to consider a letter of support for their initiative, something like that. Because I know what Councillor Young's getting at, but just letting them know we're not trying to say we don't want to support what you're doing. It's just you need to take that first step. Because if their membership, for example, doesn't want to do the project, this is all moot. So
Yeah, I think in this case, since you know the people involved, is to talk with them and explain the situation, rather than us making a motion which I don't know where that leads. But if somebody knows about an organization, whether it's faith-based or another organization that has land that would like to work with the town and the province to build non-market housing, then they should come forward. And so anybody with contacts that you have, just communicate that with them. So I don't think a further motion is required. Councillor Young.
It's just that sometimes some of the organizations, the board people are preoccupied with their finances and everything else, and so they're going to not look at working on non-market housing as a priority. So if we could come in with like, oh, you know, this is available for you to get some funding support on and doing a new build that'll be beneficial to the community and to your congregation, it will be something that could be on their radar to be involved in, whereas without more incentives for them to be involved, I think it will fall into the back burners because they're not having encouragement.
Well, just speaking personally, putting on my hat here, another hat in the community, there's a volunteer Oceanside Non-Market Housing Task Force that I'm a part of. I've done a presentation for one local faith-based group on all the data for our region already on need. And I'm happy to talk to them about programs and also to how we can sit down and write a letter to meet their needs. Because the existing programs might not be a perfect fit. And the idea of when there's a professional housing consultant who does multi-million-dollar builds and talked about building with a church and then having a commercial component and then a market residential and then a non-market residential and saying it's one of the toughest projects she's done. That was something where it's like, oh, if it's tough for you. So it's something where I think, you know, I'm happy to volunteer my time to help them write that letter. And then also too, we can bring that to council once they've got that letter and their board's on board. And council can support if they see fit.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the motion on the floor? All in favor? Opposed? The motion was that we were going to encourage him of some kind. I thought you made a motion and you supported that. No? Okay, then there's no motion. That's easy. All right, I think that completes that session.
Mayor Westbrook?
Yes,
May I just make a note? I wanted to publicly thank Twyla Slonsky for assisting with this. She led this while I was on leave, and it was a huge project, so I wanted to give special mention to her.
Thank you. Yes, it's good to clear the deck. So the next item is the Beach Day terms of reference. There's a staff recommendation. Since you deal with that, Councillor Skipsey.
Well, as it turns out, the third Monday in February, March, April, and May is a stat holiday. So it just wasn't working out. So the motion was actually that to amend the terms of reference to change regular meeting dates to the last Monday of each month. And that's the recommendation I would like to move.
Good, so just change the words fourth to last.
Yes.
Councillor Harrison seconding that. Discussion, all in favor? Motion carries. Do we need to go through the amendment, or can we just, because the motion was read out with changing of the words, so we should be good? All right, and the Select Committee on Environment has a number of issues there. Councillor Skipsey.
Well, I would like to move the recommendation. I think this addresses the concerns or the suggestions from the committee. So thank you very much to staff for this recommendation.
Thank you. Second, Councillor Vander Valk. Discussion. All in favor? Councillor Harrison.
Just one point. There was a young man who reached out to me, and he really wanted to be part of the team. And just because of the wording, he couldn't participate. So kudos to staff, because it allows a lot more young people in our area. It used to be restricted by which educational institution you're attending and stuff. So kudos to them. It's much better now. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion? All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried unanimously. And then I guess we're into planning. Mr. Sales.
Thank you, Mayor Westbrook. The first item under planning today is an overview of the upcoming official community plan review. So I do have a few slides for that. There's a PowerPoint as well. And there's more details in the package, but I would provide this update for council. Next slide. The council is aware that in 2023, the province introduced Bill 44, which established timelines for a number of requirements that all municipalities had to complete, the town included. The most recent completion was at the end of last year. A housing needs report was developed. This was done by a consultant and published by the Regional District of Nanaimo on the town's behalf. The next stage following the development of an interim housing needs report is an update of an official community plan to consider those housing needs and to reflect them in the official community plan. So that is the process that's underway. We have this year. It must be adopted by the end of 2025. So the focus of the official community plan review in 2025 will be housing. This was considered last year at the strategic planning sessions. Council was given the alternative of doing a broader official community plan review that didn't dive as deeply into topics, or alternatively to do a focus on housing and dive more deeply into the topic of housing and include more engagement on that topic. So based on council's direction, we are moving forward with the housing-focused OCP review. Other facets of the OCP do relate to housing, and the housing relates to other sections of the OCP, so it's not as simple as saying we'll review Chapter 2 of the OCP. Housing is everywhere, and things are linked. So other topics will come up, but the topic or the focus is very clearly on housing. Next slide. This colorful diagram up on the screen, which is probably totally incomprehensible on the screen, is in the package. But I just want to describe briefly what it is, because it very succinctly summarizes the approach to developing housing policy overall. So in the middle of the circle, there's one circle that describes the general types of information that the town, just like any municipality, would need to know to move forward with a review of housing policy. So it includes things like where should the housing be located, how much housing is needed, what should that housing look like, and who should be the targets of that housing policy. And finally, what should the town's role be in facilitating the development of that housing, because there are a number of alternatives you can see from other municipalities. So those are the key topics that we intend to explore through this official community plan review. One of those topics has already essentially been answered for us following the province's prescribed methodology for determining how much housing we need. So that's the only one that we're starting off with. We start with that answer, but we have to explore all the other options and engage the community on those. So next slide. The draft OCP review work plan is being implemented in 4 parts. The first part is currently underway, and that's the quality of life survey. The quality of life survey gets feedback from residents on a variety of municipal services that certainly stretch well beyond the bounds of just the official community plan review. So we find useful information from all the residents in that. But there's also a very clear focus on topics that are related to the official community plan review. And so that survey is out right now, and I think we'll have insightful feedback from our residents. We did extend the timeline for that survey approximately by 1 month to ensure that all the residents were able to provide feedback. There were some technical and delivery issues that made it challenging for some residents to respond, and we want to make sure that they do have the opportunity. So that is currently underway. And then the second phase, next slide, which essentially begins next month and continues on through May, perhaps with a summary in June. That's the most intensive period of community engagement. So it's that period of time where we're really going to be discussing those topics that I mentioned earlier, who, what, when, where, how of housing. All those would be discussed with our residents. And I'll briefly describe in a moment what the structured way of getting feedback from our residents. So the rather long community engagement process that we've gone through for other OCP reviews is compressed just because of the deadline to complete all this work by the end of the year. So normally this process of community engagement lasting 3, maybe 4 months. The last time the town did an official community plan review, that lasted a year or more, right? So it's much more in depth, and the process that we've laid out is quite detailed, and we will get meaningful and valuable feedback in a way that can be incorporated into the OCP. But some people may feel like the process is rushed, and admittedly that is so. It would be nice to have more time. Next slide. So the phase 2 process will look like this. First, there would be an introductory open house, and exactly how that is done, the details are still being developed, but we do intend to have a component of the open house during the day, working hours, so that our older demographic and those who don't want to come out to evening meetings, they can come to that afternoon session. And then there would be either early evening or some other option for people working during the day. So that's an introductory open house where people would hear about the overall process and the topics that we want feedback on, and maybe get a little bit of a teaser for what they might want to discuss in more detail later on. So following that introductory open house, we would then have a series of focuses. Each focus would get 1 intensive week of engagement. And so there would be a number of meetings, smaller, larger, online surveys. Those would all be happening during these engagement weeks. Those 4 weeks are spread out over the course of those 3 months. So there's time to engage the public during that week and then report back to the public in the week or 2 following that engagement week. So following that intensive period of engagement, we would do a summary open house. That would likely be at the Civic Center in a large format. At that time, we could present on the results of the feedback that we heard through what I've described today, and also we can report back on the quality of life survey, because by that point, we would have had all the feedback. So, next slide. With the benefit of all that input from our residents, we would then be going through the policy drafting phase, which is where we actually update the official community plan. This is a period of time where there likely wouldn't be a lot of engagement with residents, as staff would have their heads down and working to actually incorporate all that public feedback into a draft document. That draft document would then be presented to council in phase 4, next slide, which would begin likely in September, October, and proceed through the remainder of the year. I would like to note that there will be a public hearing related to an official community plan amendment. So there's lots of discussion about when public hearings are required or when they're not. This is one where there's no debate. There will be a public hearing. So the public engagement for phase 4 in the approval phase will have that official official public hearing. And I believe that concludes my report. Next slide. Oh, no, it does not. Because I wanted to just briefly describe the other project that was a council initiative and is underway this year. So that was the strategic initiative entitled Ways to Achieve Affordable Market Housing, which the letters were slightly reordered and depicted in a graphic there as WHAM, so that you remember. It's easy to remember. So WHAM Housing, that project is underway and will be completed either late this year or early next year. There's no legislative timeline or requirement to complete this work, but this was a strategic initiative from council because it was important to council to know if we have these affordable housing goals and we want to do it in a way that doesn't require ongoing subsidies from government, what would be those creative approaches? You know, maybe repurposing existing houses, buildings, garage, maybe there's existing other ownership or tenure that we could look at, co-ops and things like that. So the WHAM housing project would essentially be a business plan to kind of translate policy options at a high level to the realistic conditions on the ground in Kwalikum Beach, considering things like construction costs and financing costs and the availability of land and opportunities. So that'll be a very exciting project, and we anticipate that that will start to ramp up during the summer with the support of a consultant yet to be identified, and then that would proceed through the fall. So as the OCP review is moving into the document review phase, this one would be ramping up with more community engagement and exploration. And that concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments, questions? Councillor Harrison.
So there's a few. So basically, both through the OCP process and then the subsequent WHAM process, have staff been looking at pro formas for actual construction costs in our community? Are we actually understanding what the reality is? Because bluntly speaking, talking to several citizens in a variety of fora, some of them sort of understand the reality, most don't. Most say, oh, if you just didn't put in a granite countertop, homes would be so much cheaper, maybe 2%. So I'm just curious, what work is staff doing to both have for themselves an understanding of the economics in our community? How much does it cost to build per square foot? What are permitting costs? What are finance fees? And then secondly, how are we presenting that information to the public? So when we're talking about solutions for these problems, they're based on a reality that's actually valid in our current society, that doesn't basically presuppose solutions that are economically impossible.
Thank you. Through the chair to Councillor Harrison. So the WHAM housing project, that sort of business plan type approach, is exactly what you're talking about, because it does need to be ground truth. I would note as kind of a backstory that when the town developed the design guidelines last year with the support of a realtor and a developer in the room, there was a lot of discussion about market costs, because it's extremely challenging to build a project and make it affordable if you're starting from scratch. That's why there needs to be creative approaches considered, like adapting existing structures such as garages or splitting existing houses. So to be determined, but it's a very good point that we need to consider the market realities. Thank you.
Oh, sorry, just made a couple more. Page 103, I think there is young adults and couples outreach. Just from talking to the 24-year-old dental hygienist who cleaned my teeth last time, and you go through these exact sort of questions. Fern and Cedar and the Kwalikum Beach Inn is where she said folks her age sort of hang out. Fern and Cedar in particular is something where every time I go, I see a wide range of ages. So we might want to talk to some of the local businesses, not just these specific instances. I know you do have, say, local cafes and restaurants, but I really want to highlight Fern and Cedar because it gets more youth than any other location I can think of, really.
Sorry, Councillor Skipsey.
So my apologies. I was just raising my hand to volunteer to go to Fern and Cedar.
Yeah.
And then last thing too, I just want to give staff a compliment on page 104. They break up retirees and older seniors. So departments of gerontology, particularly in Japan and the United Kingdom, have started doing this for years. And I think it's very useful in our community to distinguish between that sort of 60 to 75 demographic and the 75 and older. It's really important because they have very different needs. So kudos to staff for trying to consider that in the process. Well done.
Thank you. Councillor Skipsey?
Thank you. Just a couple of things. So one, on page 94, it talks about the randomized phone survey. And I know there were some concerns from the community about the phone calls that were coming in. And seniors can be quite nervous about some of the calls and people asking for information, given that there's a lot of scams out there, right? And so I just wondered a little bit about the randomized phone survey, how the numbers are determined, like if it's just 752 numbers or local phone numbers, and if that then is cross-checked with addresses, because we know a lot of 752 numbers are outside of the town. And then also the value, I guess. I think it'll be interesting to see what the value is of doing the outreach versus people choosing to participate. Because if there's not a lot of difference, I wonder if there's a lot of value in that process.
Thank you. Through the chair to Councillor Skipsey. So the consultant has access to a database of all phone numbers, and they are cross-referenced to ensure that they are attached to addresses within the town. So that they did assure us that would be the data set from which they randomly selected. And your point is a good one as to the extent to which we're getting additional value by complementing the written survey with the phone-in survey. We did find a slight difference in the 2017 survey, that the opt-in, which is the written survey, had slightly different response. You know, it had a stronger representation from the seniors demographic and the retirees, slightly less representation from the young groups, but because of the way they analyze the data, they are able to correct for demographics anyway. So your point is a good one, and I think it's worth the discussion following this quality of life survey process as to whether we do it again.
Okay. And I just wanted to say, I think the work plan looks really good, and you did a wonderful job presenting it yesterday to the Kwalikum Beach Residents Association. I guess what I heard a little bit from that meeting was concerns about, we're starting off with the answer, but is the answer correct in that the 2,400 whatever houses that are needed? And I understand that it's prescriptive from the province, but it didn't totally feel scientific or specific to Qualicum Beach. And so I guess my question is, are there ways of ground truthing the data or the targets that we've come up with, just like for our own information and purposes?
Yes, thank you. Through the chair to Councillor Skipsey. Yeah, there is debate as to the validity of the approach that was taken, but for the interim housing needs report, but that was a prescriptive methodology by the province. But the point is well taken that a second look is worthwhile, which is why one of the phases of this OCP review is to get feedback from residents as to the perception of who is in most need of this focus on housing. So granted, that's more of a perception, you know, like what do our residents value the most, and where would they like to see our effort placed? I think when you combine that perspective of our residents with the type of empirical information from the consultant, I think we'll get a pretty well-rounded perspective, even if the exact number is in debate.
Thank you. I just was wondering, we did receive some correspondence with a question regarding, or a comment regarding things change over 20 years. So if the requirement through the province is for 2,400 houses or units, residential units, is there any specification thou shalt build one 1/20th of those every year, or is there some kind of clarification about that? Because I don't know that we should be expected to build to their schedule rather than what our natural growth might be. So.
Mr. Sales.
Yes, thank you. Through the chair to Councillor Vander, just to provide a little bit more clarity. The province's requirement is that the official community plan designate enough development potential to accommodate that 2,500 units approximately of development potential. It does not require that they be constructed. So we do need to take the step of making sure that our official community plan includes it. And then next year, we will need to follow up with amending the zoning bylaw to ensure that that is also reflected in the zoning bylaw. But once again, there's no requirement that the town actually construct it at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Harrison.
I just wanted to point out too, though, that there is the West Vancouver Oak Bay advisor process too. So if you're egregiously below the targets, the province noted that there were only, of the first tranche of 10 communities, only 3 were actually meeting their targets. The other 7 weren't, but they only picked the 2 that they felt were the most egregious below that. But as far as the number of units, there are 3,300 single-family households in the last census in Kwalikum Beach, slightly more than that, it's 3,300 and something. So if most of those now become potential for 4, we've vastly overstepped the 2,400. Like, we don't have to do a lot. But I do think that if we have the same number of units getting built that we saw last year, granted there are some projects sort of in the pipeline, the province would, if we kept that up for 6 or 7 years, the province might want to tapping us on the shoulder, assuming the regulations last 6 or 7 years. Who knows?
Yes, I noted that in the news there was an article about housing starts in BC since this Bill 44 came into effect, and the housing starts in BC actually dropped by 9%. People are moving to Alberta, or they're not necessarily ready to build. You can't make people, you can approve the zoning and that kind of thing, but you can't make people say, I want you to build a 4-plex on that lot. There's issues with construction crews, costs of construction is huge. So, and we looked at other areas, and in Alberta, they actually have a significant increase in housing starts, but they did it through incentives. In some of the places in Alberta, the increase was by like 30%. And I spoke with the mayor of Kwalikum, and he had a meeting with Mr. Kalon and said, you know, I think you're going to see a reduction in housing starts, not an increase because of Bill 44, and he was right. So it's pretty hard for us to tell people you can build a 4-plex on your lot, but if they don't want to do it, you can't make them. We can only, as you said, our provision now is for 4-plexes on every town lot. Well, I don't know how many people would take up on that. Anyway, the one thing I did like about this report, and you showed it at the end with the WHAM slogan, and we've received some communications about that, and for the last 2 terms, I've been asking that we would consider using town land, that we would portion off in small lots that people can buy, not people who want to live here in the summer and then go to California, who want to go to California now anyway, but go someplace else in the winter. And they would own that piece of property. And I spoke with John Larson years ago about that, and he figures that piece at the airport, where we have about 8 acres, you could probably have about 60, 70 small units, and people could buy that for a very reasonable price.
Sorry, Your Worship, just a point of order.
Yep.
We had an earlier conversation about revisiting the strategic plan. Council pushed back any non-market housing to 2027 in the strategic planning process. That was what you moved. So that's already in the rearview mirror. If we want to revisit that, that's a very large undertaking. But this is something that we discussed in our strategic plan, and it has already been passed by council on a 3-2 vote. So I'd suggest that we operate within the strategic plan and not try to create a whole new project separate from it.
Thank you. And I could stand to be corrected, but we're talking about this proposal, and part of the presentation was that WHAM housing, and I thought I'd just illustrate that by saying, I've been looking for something like this for years, where we could use that proposal, that idea, on a town-owned piece of property, which I think is the only way you may actually achieve that, because no privately held property will probably want to.
Okay, so sorry, point of order. We had that discussion in strategic planning. Can we either move on with the agenda, or I don't know what the business is here, but talking about something we already rejected in our strategic planning is inappropriate.
No, I'm talking about the idea of the so-called WHAM idea.
We're talking about a housing project which we rejected again in strategic planning. We can check the record, and if I'm wrong, you can talk about it in the next meeting.
I'll ask council, am I out of order by saying something about the WHAM idea, or did you want me to leave it alone? What's council's wish? Because I'd like to just identify something that I was really intrigued by when you showed that presentation today. So when it's on the agenda today and we're talking about that, personally, I could be corrected, but I thought to comment on something that was presented today and we're voting on, that it would be appropriate to discuss. Council okay with that?
I am.
Thank you. Councillor, are you okay with that? Okay.
Sorry, the question though is it though actually subject to the resolution for strategic planning? This is such a waste of our time, honestly. It's really bad faith, in my view, when you specifically move something and then you do the exact opposite we just finished chastising another member of council for.
No, I'm commenting on the idea of WHAM housing, where I see a real potential. I'm actually excited about that. And I've talked about that during several terms of council, and finally I see something that I think this may be the way to advance that. So I'm just an encouraging comment about today's presentation.
Okay, so just firstly, clarification, the data about housing starts going down is actually factually false. If you look at CMHC data for housing starts year over year, it's an increase. What the reports during the election were saying about housing starts was only looking at the greater Vancouver market, which is 50% condos, and the condo market in Vancouver is oversaturated and is in decline. That's where the reports came from. But if you look at all of BC, housing starts have actually increased. Two, I think it's very interesting here where you have the whole country is seized with this issue right now, and for WHAM.
So,
right?
Councillor Harrison, I was speaking about my thoughts on the presentation.
And I'm about to get to WHAM.
And I'd like to finish that, and then you can speak.
Oh, sorry, I thought you gave me the floor.
No, I'd like to speak to what I heard today being presented, and I won't belabor it too long. I don't want to create tension, even though I think it's in my place to comment on something that is not as market, but affordable. So I will definitely raise that again when the time comes, and it's perhaps more timely because it's getting 12 o'clock, so I don't want to take up too much time. I just want to say to staff, thank you for putting that issue on the table during the presentation that we saw today. I'm fully supportive of the idea. I think it's possible in Town Kwalikum Beach using town-owned land, so kudos for your presentation. Thank you. Councillor Harrison.
Yeah, so since we're talking about WHAM, again, this is why I raised the idea of ground truthing. This is the issue, which is one of the biggest issues in our country right now. The whole country is dealing with this issue. And I find it very interesting that we think we somehow have a unique idea that no one else in the country has come up with. The reality is if you could do this strictly through the market, it would already be being done. It would already be done somewhere. Again, this comes back to cost per square foot, permitting fees, financing costs. We had a presentation about 4 or 5 months ago. Those costs are way out of line with the reality in Qualicum Beach. It's closer to $400 a square foot to build. It is closer in terms of permitting fees. I'm not sure about that. That's something staff could comment on. But financing costs are about 18%. So 1,000 square feet, $400,000, 18% on top of that. You know, you do the math, you're at almost $500,000. For household income levels, you can check mortgage affordability calculators. The sweet spot is about $300 to $350. So it's something where you need subsidies, and that's why I voted against WHAM initially, is because we have existing programs for that. Instead of doing that, which is why council voted against pursuing subsidies, we're trying to do it on our own without provincial and federal funds. It's just not going to work financially.
And here is our disagreement, respectfully, because I believe we do have, we bought that lot, I think, for $128,000 24 years ago. And if we could split that up in 60, 70 pieces, you do the math, $60,000, $70,000 a plot. There's water and sewer there. There is a school at the end of the road. There's public transit right there. So I see that as an opportunity for somebody to buy those small lots for a very reasonable price. And they can have a modular home or a mobile home, single, double, whatever they can afford. But at least they own something that they can work with, and it's affordable. So I disagree with Councillor Harrison that respectfully. I think this is an option, and I've spoken with many people about this who'd say, well, if it comes up, I want to be in on it. So I don't think it's out of the question, and therefore I think the opportunity for us to discuss it further will be during that presentation. Thank you. Anything else? Councillor Skipsey? Okay.
My question that I had asked about the building the 2,400 houses came out of a sense to try to alleviate any sense of panic that we have to build 2,400 units, like we have to do it and not consider things carefully, because I think that we still need to look at a lot of variables that are involved in that. So it was more that trying to let people know there really isn't a sense of panic that we have to start coming out with our hammers and nails tomorrow kind of thing.
No, panic is never a good thing. Thank you. Councillor Skipsey?
I just wanted to move the staff recommendation.
Seconded, Councillor Harrison. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Thank you. Mr. Seals, Community Emergency Preparedness.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Westbrook. The next item is council authorization to proceed with a grant application in the amount of $80,000 for the 2025 Community Emergency Preparedness Fund. At a previous council meeting, council endorsed the City of Parksville applying for a grant on the town's behalf so that we could collaborate on a grant project. This is a similar type of project where the City of Parksville will be supporting the town's application for this emergency program grant. The funding from this grant, if successful, would be used to purchase additional supplies for the emergency operations center, and also to do training for the volunteers that will, the volunteers and staff that would be involved in that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Harrison.
Just moving the staff recommendation.
Thank you. I turn to you because public safety is kind of in your bailiwick. And seconded by Councillor Skipsey. Discussion. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Thank you. Please proceed.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is a development variance permit application for a property at 2955 Island Highway West. And there is a map on page 125 that would be useful to pull up on the screen. So the application before council is an application to vary several setbacks for this property so that an addition can be put. This property is on the Island Highway, and so if you're looking on the screen up there, the upper portion would be the waterfront. So currently a portion of the property, the patio essentially, is surrounded by a seawall which is outside of the property line. The proposal is to construct an addition slightly closer to the property line, and the variance, if advanced by council, would vary the minimum setback from the waterfront side from 6 meters to 0.1 meters, to vary the minimum setback to the natural boundary from 15 meters to 0.1 meters, and to vary the parcel coverage for this property from 55% to 55.9%. And with that, if council does advance this, it would be the subject of public notification. So development variance permits, if it passes the first stage with council, then we would send notice to any property owners. The minimum requirement is 50 meters, but as a matter of practice, the town has been doing 100-meter notification radiuses for applications such as this. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments or questions to Mr. Councillor Harrison?
So I understand that the staff recommendation, the rationale behind it. My question, though, is that we've had the oceanfront master plan for quite some time, predates my time on council, and we haven't really significantly moved that forward, particularly for private properties. I think we have one example, maybe two, in town. Would there be a way if we said, okay, we'll give you an addition, but when Green Shores is done in the area, you are required to participate? Is that something we could actually do, or is that something that's not legal?
Mr. Seals.
Thank you. Through the chair to Councillor Harrison, that's an interesting concept. I think the challenge on this property, because it's already past the property line, is that the town couldn't commit the province to authorizing that type of work in the first place. So it would be complicated. That's why, this application is essentially ignoring the part that's outside the property line for the purpose of discussion, only focusing on the minimum setbacks from the titled boundary of the property, which is noted on the plan up there.
Thank you. Could I have a motion to the staff recommendation? Councillor Skipsey, Councillor Vander, discussion, Councillor Young. Go ahead.
I'm looking at the renovations. I think it's not past the encroachment that is already there on the right-hand part of the existing house. And I'm thinking that in that area along the waterfront, it's mostly cabins that were built years ago. And aren't they all encroaching?
Mr. Sales.
Thank you, Mayor Westbrook. Encroachments are a big issue in this section of the waterfront. When they were constructed, they were likely much smaller, and surveying may have been done by squinting and looking down the road right away. So yes, those issues do exist. I would point out that the area that's encroaching onto the Crown foreshore, there's nothing that would stop the property owner from maintaining and renovating that. It's only when you're increasing the nonconformity, where in this case it would be constructing an addition that is closer to the property line. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor, anybody else? And thank you for adding a bit of levity to the discussion. Councillor Young.
Well, I just think that for people that have houses that are built many, many years ago, I think they should have a right to do renovations. And because it is a small square space to begin with, and the resident wants to just have a bigger living space, and the encroachment isn't past what's already been allowed, I feel that it's worth considering, because on the reasoning for refusing, it does say because of existing encroachments on the setbacks. Well, everybody on that waterfront is probably doing that, and that it is a vulnerable location. There is that concrete seawall there. It's solid, I would believe, and this moving up just a few feet more, and I'm reading also that it's not going to be blocking the neighbor's view, and I just feel that it's worth considering.
And we are right now. Thank you.
And are the people here, could they speak to this?
No,
or-
we're asking you to make your comments and consider your comments in light of the recommendation and what's being presented. Councillor Harrison.
And just to Councillor Young's question, I believe the property owners make a presentation when we've done the statutory notification. And now we're discussing whether or not we do the statutory notification. And Mr. Sales is nodding, so I'm not completely wrong. Okay. I still strongly think, though, that this is something where every time a property owner with all these non-conforming properties comes forward and says, I want to do something and it requires a variance, we should say, okay, as long as you do green shores when we do green shores. And that's how you're going to get enough property owners all collaborating that we can go to the province and say, we've got 5 homes that are going to do this now, and we need your approval. And this property in particular is a bit of a sticky widget. I get it. But this is what we're getting as a whole. We know what seawalls do to our foreshore. We know how it reduces biodiversity. We know how it leads to foreshore loss of the beach. You can get more rocks. This is something where I think we can do a little bit of a wiggle room on our side that I'm not thrilled with. I understand the rationale. You're over that 55%. You're really, really close to the natural side. But I do think this is something where we start building up private properties where it's essentially like something on title saying, when we do this, you have to approve it. Because I just think of the one project in our previous term and all the headaches with the neighbors, and as soon as it's done, they'll say, oh, it looks lovely, I wish I'd done it. So I really feel that if we reject this out of hand, it'll be missing an opportunity to do that in the future.
Mr. Sales, you've identified a concern about the legality of this, that idea. What do you think?
So, as noted by Councillor Harrison earlier, the decision today is whether to provide notice and consider this at a future meeting. The legality of tying future authorizations to potentially issue a variance, that's something staff could research if council is interested. Off the top of my head, I couldn't give you a definitive answer.
Anyone else? Councillor Van Valk. Oh, sorry, Ms. Svensson.
I would just like to clarify, because there's been a few discussions back and forth, but currently I have the motion on the floor being moved by Councillor Skipsey, seconded by Councillor Vander Valk, that council refuses the development variance permit application for 2955 Island Highway West. The alternative recommendation is for statutory notification. Just want to make sure we are clear.
Yeah. No, the motion is as the staff recommendation.
Okay, thank you.
Discussion. Councillor Harrison.
Well, I still like to check whether we do this or not. I'd still like to have that conversation with staff, with legal, regardless of the outcome of this, because I think this is something where we've been sitting around and waiting for people to do this, and I think 2 people have raised their hands. I think there was a smaller Green Shores project, I think around Judges Row, that didn't get as much attention. But I'd really prefer us to accelerate this, because we do know long-term, seawalls can fail, we've seen that, and we do know that they're actually bad for the foreshore. So I'd prefer that we lay this on the table, but we can vote how we vote. But I would be making a subsequent motion that we investigate the legality of that after the vote, if that's okay with the chair.
I think that's a good idea, that after we decide on this, we look into how we can help make that happen, because I know what you were talking about on Hodges Road, it does work. I hadn't heard that other neighbors wished they'd participated, but okay, one. So there is a good example of how we can actually help protect people's properties, but it needs to be more in unison and not just one off. So I think we'll vote on this motion, and then if you want to make a motion to explore that option, then we can do that. Councillor Young.
Can I also have this, ask to have this referred to the Variance Committee for further review?
Mr. Seals?
Thank you. Through the chair to Councillor Young. So the Board of Variance operates independently of council. So council wouldn't refer an item to the Board of Variance, and that application would have to be based on hardship. So that would be an independent application that someone would have to decide to make on their own. It would be unusual for a council to refer something to the Board of Variance.
Thank you. On the question on the floor, all in favor? Opposed? Councillor Young, Councillor Harrison opposed. Motion carries. Thank you. Councillor Harrison.
Yes, thank you very much, Your Worship. Just move that staff investigate the potential legality of requiring Green Shore foreshore development in conjunction with variance or other rezonings.
Ms. Varela?
Hi, thank you, Your Worship. So one of the things as we start to add additional tasks to staff who are in a really tight position right now, perhaps we could refer it to staff for a recommendation on possible timing when something like that could be undertaken, if council would kindly consider that.
Yeah, there was no timeline in it. So as time permits. Thank you. Councillor Harrison?
Oh, I'm just going to agree with that. There's no intent of a timeline. There's no intent next meeting in camera. But this is something where I do hope we start advancing this, because what we have with our waterfront master plan is actually a very rigorous document. It's an excellent document. And it'd be great to start seeing it advance more rapidly.
Yep. Great, thank you. So, Councillor Young.
Just a comment on timeline. Is it normal for requests for permit applications, variances, that it takes months? Like, I'm seeing that this was sent in August the 30th of last year, and it's just now coming up for a decision. And if we defer another option for, we don't know, unspecified timeline, that is a hardship on the resident.
That's your opinion. Mr. Seals.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Westbrook. Sometimes applications are made without all the information that's required. So in this case, a land surveyor was required to provide a plan showing exactly where the addition was and the existing building. So until a land surveyor provides that information, it's not something that can be relied on for the purpose of a development variance permit, especially in a case like this where, you know, you're down to a variance that would put something 0.2 meters from the property line. There's no tolerance for error, and so it had to be done by a land surveyor. Thank you.
Right. Ms. Svensson, did we not vote on the recommendation already?
Yes, we voted to refuse the development variance
Right.
permit. Now we're on the motion from Councillor Harrison.
Right. So any further discussion on that? All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried unanimously. Thank you, Councillor Harrison. The next item, I'll get my glasses on. This is regarding Burnham Road. Mr. Seals.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Westbrook. Next item on the agenda is a development permit for a property on Burnham Road. Addresses 389 and 391 Burnham Road. There's a slide, or a page on 132 has probably the most useful map for the consideration today. So this property is on a steep slope, and it's also within an environmental development permit area. So within that, pruning and tree removals were prohibited even before the tree protection bylaw. So in this case, what they're proposing to do is open up some windows for views. So this would require retopping 4 trees that are within that area, and also removing some limbs to open up windows around the existing trees. So the map up on the screen shows a few features here. So we have the trees that would require retopping are here. There was some pruning that was already done earlier this year to remove branches within the maximum size. So branches of up to 10 centimeters in diameter could be removed. That work was started in this area, and then this is just property lines over here. So with that, staff do recommend in favor of this. It's the trees that are recommended to be topped have been topped in the past, so they're not, structurally retopping them may be a good thing to do for the long-term health of the trees, although topping is generally a very bad thing to do. And with regard to opening up windows for views, so windows would be times where you remove a branch to have a perspective through, but you're not removing the entire tree. That's actually something that's identified in the development permit area guidelines as a potential. So if the intention is to open up a view, opening up little windows is actually a responsible way to do that. So with that, the recommendation is to proceed with the development permit. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a question. There's those 2 properties. There's no homes on it. So who's benefiting? Who would benefit, or who's asking for this, the view corridor to be put in place?
Thank you. So it's the property owner, and I'm not clear on all the rationale. There may be a planned project in the future.
Okay, so are those properties attached to the property below?
No, they're titled separately.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Harrison.
I was just going to move the staff recommendation.
Thank you. Seconded, Councillor Vander. Discussion? Councillor Harrison.
Just one point, I do believe this is something that should go to staff. When there's a development permit area, it should have a higher level. I wonder, though, if it should be going to council. I know this is currently we're following the process, but some of the things where it's like literally cutting off a couple limbs of trees and then redoing work that's already been done, I'm not sure that's really the council lane per se. This is a great decision for staff. I know you guys are too busy, so I'm not going to suggest that we start bringing things back to start delegating authority, but I just comment that we might want to think about where we could make it a more efficient process for citizens, where it does need that staff checkpoint, but maybe not that council checkpoint.
I agree, but when chainsaws get fired up, people get very nervous. So having this brought here, we all know now what's going on, and I think it's just good information. It doesn't happen that often, but when it does, I think to keep us all informed, I think is a good thing. But you're right, it seems like it could be operationalized, but I think on the other side, having this information and know why, I think it's a good thing. And it's an easy one to pass. Councillor Skipsey.
Thank you. I agree with you, Your Worship, that it is good to know, and especially, like, it concerns me, this steep slopes, because we know what happens if trees are removed, and I've seen, you know, places where people, I appreciate this process. I think it's important. And I'm not that concerned about those cedar trees because they can be amazing. I know my father had topped trees on our property, and before you know it, they're just as tall as they were before. So, yeah, I think this is fine.
All right, further discussion? All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Thank you. And then Ravensbourne.
Thank you, Mayor Westbrook. The last item under planning for today is consideration of a development permit for a property on the airport. So similar to the consideration last meeting, this is a form and character development permit application. So we review those applications in comparison to the development permit area guidelines. Development permit area guidelines at the airport are relatively utilitarian, so not many bells and whistles required for the construction of an airport hangar. The plans are in your package. There aren't slides because it looks very similar to the airport hangar that was considered last time. The one caveat, and this is a very important point to note, that anytime someone wants to construct something at the airport when it requires a new lease, consideration of leases is considered by council in camera setting. So council could authorize this development permit today, but it still needs to be considered as to whether council wants to lease the land to this person in the first place for this use. So the recommendation is to proceed with authorization of the development permit because it does comply with the form and character development permit area guidelines. There will be a subsequent discussion as to the lease itself. So that is the recommendation before you. Thank you.
Thank you. So this, if it gets approved, would be subject to the lease being agreed to. Ms. Marilla?
Thank you, Your Worship. And the other consideration is that it is done in accordance with the policy that's attached, the Qualicum Beach Airport Water Supply and Sewer Service, which does require hookup to water and sewer. So I know there's been some debate out in the public on that, and I just want to make sure that everyone's aware there is a policy. So thank you.
Thank you. Was it moved and seconded? Okay, need a mover and a seconder. Councillor Skipsey, Councillor Vander, discussion. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you. And then, I guess, engineering and operations. Mr. Watson will handle that one.
Yep, thank you, Your Worship. I'll try to make this quick. This is my memo from staff recommending that council authorize the submission of a grant application in the amount of $197,000 to the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure's Active Transportation Fund for the purpose of implementing road safety improvements along Village Way fronting Kwalikum Secondary School. This project is on top of the Community Transportation Plan list, tied with the Highway 19A traffic calming elements between Judges Row and Crescent Road West. You may recall back in October, excuse me, we submitted this project for council's consideration for a separate grant application, and it was denied due to the cost. The design for that particular project was based on the property's institutional designation in the town's official community plan and its location within the village core, which required the development to include elements including sidewalks, street trees, ornamental lights, low-impact management of rainwater, all of which pushed the cost up to over $2 million. So we went back to the drawing board and we reduced the scope of the project down to $328,000. So that's a significant reduction. And if we go to page 4 on the report, I've got some renderings there to show you what the proposal includes. There we go. So that's a rendering of the east end of the Kwalikum Secondary School property. And the part of the refuge area exists on the south side of the road there. That's the left-hand side. But we would be making improvements to that. We'd also be adding median islands, or a median island on that end of the property, as well as a sidewalk on the north side of the road. We would also add RFB pedestrian crosswalk lights, flashing lights on each side of the existing sidewalk. And if you scroll to the next page, this is what we would implement on the west end of the property. So there would be the addition of 2 new median islands, one on each side of Condor Way on Village Way, as well as a new short segment of sidewalk on the north side of the road. And we would also add a new crosswalk crossing Village Way on the east side of Condor Close, and adding another set of rapid flashing pedestrian beacons there as well. So the grant covers 60% of the cost, and based on the $328,000 estimated cost, the grant would cover $197,000. So on that note, would council like to proceed?
Thank you. Questions? Councillor Skipsey.
Thank you. As I mentioned earlier, I was at the KSS PAC meeting last evening, and there had been a request for an update on this project, as they had provided a letter of support for the previous proposal. So I'm wondering if that letter of support can still be used, or they did say that they would be very pleased to provide a new letter of support if needed.
Through the chair, yes, we have to include those in the submission, so we'll be reaching for a fresh version of that, yes.
Fresh version, thank you. Any other questions, comments? Could I have a motion to proceed? Councillor Skipsey, Councillor Vander, discussion. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Thank you. And I think now we need a motion to go in camera, and I'd ask Ms. Svensson to read out the reason why.
Thank you, Mayor Westbrook. So we're closing under Section 91E, which is the acquisition, disposition, or expropriation of land or improvements if the council considers that disclosure could reasonably be expected to harm the interests of the municipality. And we need unanimous vote of council.
We have unanimous support, so we can have a 5-minute break. We'll close the gallery. Thank you for attending today.